Wow. Как рад вас видеть. It's great to see you all. I'm sorry that my Russian has deteriorated to the point where I can't speak in Russian, but I have the offer of some interpretation. Я чуть-чуть понимаю, и we'll get along. Как международный на МКС? Чуть-чуть по-английски, чуть-чуть по-русски. There we go. So it's been very interesting for me to be here at this conference. There's a sense of a real shift in people's awareness, industrial awareness of open source. And I think that has come about because we've had companies and individuals who understand what the future looks like and have been leading towards the future. And I imagine that you are many amongst those people who've been leading towards that future. So both on behalf of, I think, all of open source and free software, and specifically on behalf of Ubuntu, it's a great pleasure to meet with all of you. I assume that you are all interested in different parts of free software. I'm very happy to answer any questions that you might have. Should we start with some of the questions that came from folks? At the moment, our best position is to be a partner with the community and a partner with the software community and a partner with the hardware community. So we don't have any plans for Ubuntu-specific hardware devices. That would put us in competition with our partners like Dell and Lenovo and Asus and Acer. But we are increasingly focused on making sure that from a software point of view, we deliver a complete experience. In the next version of Ubuntu, we're taking the first step to be able to design and deliver what we hope will be a really beautiful user experience. And we've realized that, in fact, we need to make that investment so that there's leadership as to what the whole user experience will be like. But we will still partner with hardware companies on servers, on cloud, and in personal computing. We are interested in the idea of potentially working with a partner to make a computer hardware which is all free software, which has free software BIOS and obviously free software operating system and applications. And I'm curious whether that you think that would be of particular interest or particular value. Would you choose something because it was completely free software from the BIOS to the desktop, or is that less important to you than having access to the full range of hardware that's out there today?
Предлагается создание компьютера полностью свободного, начиная от BIOS, заканчивая пользовательскими программами. И Марк собирается устроить что-то типа голосования, как я понимаю, кому интереснее свобода программного обеспечения в сравнении с функциональностью и количеством прикладных программ. То есть Все по идее должны ответить на этот вопрос.
Кто против, пусть руку поднимет, так лучше.
Кто за свободу, поднимайте руку.
Наоборот.
Кто за функционал, опускайте. Или наоборот, подопилок.
Usually when I ask the question, people say, well, I really would like this, but that laptop over there is 1 millimeter thinner. And then someone else says, well, I really would like that laptop over there has a slightly bigger screen. And someone else says, well, I really would like that, but that laptop has a slightly smaller screen. So I conclude that ultimately people would like all software to be free software, and all hardware to work with, completely with free software. But at the end of the day, they will choose those things rather than compromising there to get something which is all free software. At least so far, that is what we've seen.
Мак говорит о том, что разным пользователям нравятся разные компьютеры, кому-то потоньше компьютер, кому-то потолще, кому-то. Мак говорит о том, что всем нравятся разного типа компьютера, кому-то компьютер нравится толще, кому-то тоньше, кому-то с большим экраном, кому-то с меньшим. И невозможно сразу же угадать все вкусы пользователей Ubuntu, поэтому Ubuntu стремится быть независимым от железа, чтобы он мог поставить на любой компьютер, который понравился покупателю компьютера.
I'm also interested if you think that it would be important for us to do an Ubuntu phone or an Ubuntu tablet, whether you think that Ubuntu would do well on those environments. I'm interested to hear whether you think that those would be important things for us to do.
Интересно ли вам, чтобы появился планшет либо телефон с операционной системой Ubuntu? Поднимите руку.
Понятно?
What about computers? What about computers? Android?
Well, I think Android is an important competitor. I think there's no question that when Google releases the code, they release it as open source. But I think that if we were to do an Ubuntu platform for mobile computing, it would obviously have different characteristics. It might be easier for other people to take it and change it. It might be more familiar for people who are used to GNU Linux on the desktop. So it would be an interesting competition.
Okay, I have the next question. It's number 2. There are lots of holy wars in the internet about Unity desktop environments. Some of people like it very much, some of them don't. In what direction will you go with Unity? Will it have more configuration options, or it will stay light and easy? And does Canonical have any statistics concerning users of Unity?
So first, we're not interested in holy wars. What we're interested in is something that we can share with confidence that will actually make users' life better. So I have my opinions, but at the end of the day, we make a version of Unity, and then we take it into a room, and we bring people off the street, and we ask them to do things like take a camera, get their photographs onto their desktop, then get them onto Flickr, and we test it. It's not a religious war. It's not a holy war. It doesn't matter if it was written in GTK or Qt. I don't care if it's in C++ or in Python. What I care about is that each time we make something which is easier for that person off the street to use. And I care that we do it as free software. So that's the criteria. And Unity is being built with that as the goal. It's very difficult for us to know what other free software communities will do. It's very difficult for us to know, it's very difficult for us to make our plans if we have to constantly refer to other groups. All we can do is say, look, that's the commitment we're making. We'll make that commitment, we'll put in that investment, we'll do that work. And then people will either like the result or they won't. You asked a very interesting question. You said, will Unity remain light and easy to use, or will it have lots of options? If that's the choice, it's a very easy choice. Light and easy to use. If options make for an easier to use product for more people, then they're good. If they essentially allow anything and everything to be possible and therefore make it impossible to use, then they're not good. So it's a very straightforward position. It's not really worth getting all upset about. And generally I find the people who get very upset about that aren't likely to actually be productive participants. So we have a great community building up around Unity, and that community, I think, shares the values that we have, which is that it should be beautiful, it should be easy to use, it should use technology beautifully, right? Actually use the fact that we have all this graphics horsepower. But it shouldn't do it just for the sake of technology. It should do it to make users' lives better. that's how we make our decision.
Okay, I will translate the short version.
Okay.
Марк говорит, что они не заинтересованы в каких-либо священных войнах между тем, какой интерфейс лучше, какой хуже. Они стараются сделать интерфейс наиболее простым для пользователя. Они даже проводят испытания, приглашая людей с улицы, чтобы они могли сделать какую-либо элементарную задачу, которая им ставится. Например, сделать фотографию с веб-камеры, которая должна подключиться, и загрузить ее на Flickr. Если у них это получается, значит интерфейс удачный, значит они справились со своей задачей. По поводу следующей части вопроса в сторону функциональности или в сторону простоты и удобства будет двигаться Unity, то естественный ответ в сторону простоты и удобства. Потому что если у нас будет огромное количество настроек, с которыми мы никак не сможем совладать, и они будут неудобными, то нужны ли они тогда на самом деле?
I think it's also true that Ubuntu has always been, Ubuntu is a platform on top of which you can experience lots of different things. You can experience KDE, you can experience Unity, you can experience more lightweight desktop environments, XFCE, Boris, like a crazy little desktop environment from Google. All of those things should be possible on Ubuntu. So for expert users, you should be able to get what you want on top of Ubuntu. We're not saying that you shouldn't be allowed to do it or shouldn't be possible to do it. We're just saying the default experience should be beautiful and easy to use so that you can give it to your friends and not have to spend all the time telling them how to use it.
Ubuntu предполагается дружелюбной операционной системой, которая не диктует каких-либо строгих правил или софта, которые необходимо использовать. И пользователи могут установить как KDE, так и другие различные внешние виды операционной системы, то есть оболочки, либо какой-либо другой софт. Для того, чтобы не было каких-либо четких закономерностей, что если вы пришли к другу, вы попросили, вы поставили ему Ubuntu, и вы теперь должны ему объяснять, как именно ей пользоваться, какие есть правила, каких нет правил. Вы можете ему писать, что он может кастомизировать все как угодно под себя.
Are there any questions here? Maybe we should
Yes, any questions?
About stability. Now Unity is but the development, when you decide it is ready for production, is it ready now for coming release?
The decision to use Unity as the default platform, default interface for netting was really only taken in the last few weeks. Once the platform release team, which doesn't make Unity, was able to look at Unity and look at the alternatives and say, okay, on balance, this is the better interface. There are still things that cause Unity to crash. We have 2 weeks left to fix those issues. The team fixes about 80 issues in a week. So we're very confident that Unity will be a good and solid experience for end users. But this is effectively the 1.0. The other alternative was for us to sort of push back the 1.0 till 11.10. Then we only have one cycle for 12.04, the LTS. So these are difficult decisions. Some people will say, it's not ready, but the same people might say it's never ready, right? If you look at the that would be very appreciated. Yeah. I mean, we are seeing a great community build up around Unity. We're seeing lots of patches coming in. Some of those patches are changing behavior in ways that we're keen to see someone trying new kinds of behaviors, and we test those to see if they actually do make it better. Some of them are fixing bugs, some of them are making good on more hardware. So that's awesome. If you're interested in OpenGL, and you're interested in window managers and the desktop thing, it's a great project to participate. Give a lot of love.
Марк говорит то, что Unity сейчас очень сильно развивается, и вот последняя фраза о том, что если вам интересно работать с OpenGL, с графикой, то он будет очень ценить, если вы поможете в разработке Unity, который сейчас довольно большое количество различных ошибок, но за 2 недели до предстоящего релиза они планируют исправить большинство из них. Его команда исправляет около 80 ошибок в неделю.
Ubuntu has already a solid usage base in Russia. Well, it's very popular, not the most popular Linux operating system here. However, if you compare it with the other popular distributions, you'll discover that there is probably not sufficient presence here. I mean, you seldom get canonical representatives speak about the current policy in Russia, or even about the user community in Russia. So you get the sense that Ubuntu exists somewhere else, and our Russian community is isolated. Are you concerned about it? And do you have any plans to fix this situation?
Well, I think that is a challenge that exists at two levels. One level is at a community level, and another is at an industry level. Part of my visit here is part of the rationale for the visit to the folk from Canonical here is to start to establish partnerships here with local companies who can be a bridge for Canonical into industry here. For us, one of the things that makes Ubuntu really powerful and important is that it is both has a community angle and clear ways for community to participate, and it has a corporate angle. And it's in fact, it's the combination of those that makes it different. There are other platforms that are very strongly a company platform. There are other platforms that are really like exclusively on community basis. Ubuntu is an attempt to bring those together. As for the community level of interaction, I would encourage folk here to look at things like UDS, which in May is in Budapest, so not very far away. It only takes a few to reach out and build relationships with the global community for you to feel much more tightly integrated. And we would be welcoming and supportive to folks who essentially wanted to come with that specific intent. You don't have to be a Unity programmer, you don't have to be an engineering rock star. UDS is as much about the community as it is about the platform and technology. So I think there are ways that we can bridge the gap both at the community, at a community level and at the industry level. I think Russia will be an important market, but I think our access to that market is best through partners at this stage. And that will likely remain the case for another couple of years. There are great companies here doing good things with open source, and there is a commitment to open up an industry we'd like to support.
Если кратко, то вопрос был о том, будет ли поддерживаться самой компанией Canonical сообщество на территории России, которое сейчас живет довольно изолированной жизнью. Ответ Марка таков, что сейчас Canonical приходит в Россию через компании, которые здесь уже имеют некоторый бизнес с open source, и, соответственно, будут этим заниматься уже более активно. Okay, was can we leave this question?
That was one question regarding community. Many people confuse the community because while Canonical guys working on very old GNOME code, which you call community, others visitors rolling out new shiny GNOME 3. And what will happen with GNOME community in upstream when
So the question is about GNOME and Unity, essentially. So a couple of things that I think should be absolutely clear. The first is that by our understanding, GNOME has always been an open ecosystem. Or through GNOME's strongest times, it was an open ecosystem. It accepted contributions from multiple different places. There was no one true GNOME, but in fact you had variations that shared a common set of tools and common approach. When we set out to build Unity, what happened was we were being engaged by companies that wanted to put Linux on networks, and they wanted to work with us to do that. They wanted to work in secret on that. And we said, look, rather than working on lots of different things, we'd like to work on one thing, and we'd like to do it using these GNOME tools, which is actually more difficult for us to do. And the reason we wanted to do that is we figured that that would become part of GNOME. So we've always articulated the idea of Unity as a shell for GNOME, Unity as part of GNOME. And until fairly recently, that was how GNOME, in fact today still, that's how many developers think of GNOME. At the time also, we knew that there was the starting effort to build GNOME Shell. We looked at GNOME Shell and the design, and it was very different to Unity and the design. So you have two very different things. Why not do them both? They're very different, they complement each other, they make the whole more interesting. So we built Unity, we shipped products, we open sourced Unity, we shipped products based on Unity. Then the GNOME Shell design changed to be much more like Unity. Now, we can't make plans 2 years ago on the basis of that somebody else might change their interface to be more the way we would like it. Especially when we talk to them, they say they won't change it. It's just very difficult and unreasonable for us to have a time machine. That would be fun, but we just don't have one. So I feel like at each step we have acted in a way that is consistent with GNOME and how the GNOME community has defined itself. In recent months, there's been a new idea being pushed within GNOME, mainly from the people who are building GNOME Shell, that there should only be one view of GNOME, and that should be GNOME Shell. That's not the view of all GNOME developers. I talk to people who make AppyWord, or I talk to people who make lots of different applications that are kind of broadly within GNOME. They say, well, no, I'd like my application to work within this whole broad ecosystem. But there is this view now being put out that's very strongly says GNOME should only be GNOME Shell. I tell you, I don't know where that leaves us. What should we do? Right? We know that Unity is designed very carefully. We know we have a roadmap that will make it even better. What should we do? It's a complicated question. I don't know all the answers. But I come back to this idea that ultimately we have to go where users need us to go. Like our responsibility, at the end of the day, if we have to make a tough choice, our responsibility is to build a system for users. Right? That's the first thing. There will be a lot of people who will say a lot of things and get very political, but at the end of the day, that's what we're going to do. I still say I would like to do that as part of GNOME. But it's up to GNOME to decide if they actually want GNOME to embrace a broad set, or if they want to define it narrowly. I can't make that decision for them. I thought it was a broad set, and what we were doing was fine. But if they decide to define it narrowly, then it would be wrong to describe us as a fork, right? This would simply be GNOME saying they don't want the work, in which case we continue with the work. There will be a lot of hard words, but I feel like we will be doing the right thing. Does that answer your question?
Нужен ли кому-нибудь перевод?
Да, не все понятно было.
Что?
Не все понятно было.
Хорошо. Вопрос?
Да.
Задайте.
Считаете ли вы, что для Ubuntu выпуск таких тонких облачных клиентов, как Google Chrome, что вы будете делать, если такие устройства захватят большинство умов? И все станут
What do you think about your competitor Google with Google OS, Chrome OS, sorry, which will be pre-installed on laptops and netbooks, and maybe they will really compete with you with Unity and Ubuntu?
I think that that's very true. I think Chrome OS will be a real competitor. I think some people have said, oh, Chrome OS failed to deliver, but it's software, sometimes it takes a bit longer. That's normal. I think it's too early to judge essentially whether they succeed or they fail. At the end of the day, users decide. So we will make the best system we can. If Chrome OS is the vision for the future that you want and that users want, then that's good. If Ubuntu, with Unity, is the vision for the future that users want, then that's good too.
What's better?
What's that?
Well, which one is better?
Well, my sense is
For you, I mean.
Clearly, I think it's more interesting to have rich clients. I think it's more interesting to have information, your own control over your own information. I think one of the fundamental assumptions of Chrome OS is that you're comfortable with essentially that Google sees all of your information. Me, not so much. You know? So, but users sometimes don't care. You know, what I care about, they may not care about. So this is, I think, one of the key open questions. And I think it's great that Google is building it. They're spending a lot of money. At the same time, think about it this way. We have one of the world's biggest technology companies putting a lot of effort to making sure that the Chrome web browser runs brilliantly on Linux. So if the web is the future, and I think the web is the future, we can do the web just as well as Chrome OS. Now maybe there'll be things that Chrome OS can do better, and there are things that we can do better, and I don't know how those works out for that. The web itself, you know, essentially Google is helping us. So I don't feel like punching them in the mouth overnight, because it's very useful that they, you know, make Chrome a great browser. And we do work with them, and we, you know, I think that is very useful.
What will you do if Google wins the war and you lose all the users, 1% user stake? Are you planning to switch to service?
I will be wise, and what will you do? Of course. When we all adapt, we all, you know, we evolve. Technology today doesn't look like it did 10 years ago. So I think it's a very interesting competition. And I'm not afraid of competition. I anticipate, you know, that I will learn much along the way. So will Google.
Are you planning to invest in cloud services?
So cloud is very important for us. Obviously, you know, open source is really at the front of cloud computing, public cloud computing. We hope that open source will also be at the front of the private cloud computing as well, even though a lot of people run the virtualization of proprietary infrastructure. The cloud piece is being open source. We're doing a lot of work to make sure Ubuntu runs beautifully in public cloud. So if you use Amazon Web Services, or if you use Rackspace, then Ubuntu should work really well there. And we're also bringing things like Eucalyptus and OpenStack into Ubuntu, so you can build your own clouds. So I feel very comfortable that Ubuntu has a role in the cloud. So one of the key critical subsystems for us is the graphical subsystem. The whole desktop depends on it. X, which is the technology that we've been getting on, has many issues that make it difficult to have really good drivers for X that also take advantage of all of the graphics hardware. So we and lots of other people were looking at this problem, and there are many options. One option which we looked at was that Canonical could build a new display server. Why not? We have the skills, we have the money. Another option is to find a proprietary one and buy it and open source it. Another option is to work with one of the existing communities, and there are a couple. When we looked across all of those, we thought, look, none of them is ready now, but the one that looks like it has the most right now is the web. So that's why I said, look, I think that the next step for us is to get Unity onto Wayland. That's a good fit, because a lot of what we've built into Unity, we have two versions of Unity, one for 2D and one for 3D, but the 3D one really uses OpenGL. It's designed to use the graphics hardware properly. So if we can have all OpenGL down to the hardware, that's beautiful. And so that's why we sort of made that announcement. And the result of us making the announcement was Wayland as a project got much bigger. Lots more people came in, because people are more willing to commit to a project and get involved in a project once they think, okay, this is going to be meaningful. If there are 5 and anyone can win, then which one do you work on? So you don't work on anything. But if you think, okay, this one is going to win, then more people will win. And that was the main purpose of me making the statement, because I wanted to accelerate the forward movement of Wayland. And I think we see that today. We have done quite a lot of work in the last 9 months around touch and and gestures. And we've done that work both independently and inside of X. And we will make the same available, if not directly through Wayland, then certainly to Wayland-based applications. I think the model will be a bit different anyway, but that's kind of where we will probably have the biggest impact.
Okay, the next question is Vladimir.
Okay.
Sorry.
Yeah, you said something about clouds. How do you think that's development of enterprise cloud contributed to the way we buy features? It is already staple for enterprise that use it such as hosting or things like this.
So Ubuntu Enterprise Cloud essentially is Eucalyptus plus Ubuntu, pre-configured and easy to install. And Eucalyptus certainly has a roadmap to add additional capabilities and features. Right now, we also have OpenStack. And so there's some clear evaluation going on between OpenStack and Eucalyptus to see which of those should be the default infrastructure, cloud infrastructure for Ubuntu. I can't prejudge the trajectory there, but I do know that by the time we get to 12.04 LTS, there will be one default. The other one will probably be supported as well. So we have a support path either on one or the other. Either way, I think cloud infrastructure remains very important, but I don't think we're done yet. I think there's a lot still to be done to make it very scalable, to make it to add the sorts of capabilities that allow you really to manage a big cloud, the ability to move workloads off a machine, take the machine down, replace the machine, add the machine back to the cloud. That sort of dynamism is still missing from all of the sort of public, private cloud, open source implementations. So I think there's still a lot of work to be done there. It will grow and change. No, it's really, I would describe it as really for sort of departmental clouds, where you have a department and you want to burst workloads onto the cloud, and you want to use it maybe for test and development, and then deploy those workloads to the public cloud. So it's useful and being used. I would not recommend that any institution could just move everything to the private cloud today, for lots of different reasons. Sometimes the workload, sometimes the cloud infrastructure. Right? There's lots of friction. But is it worth building a cloud? Definitely. Take 10 old, servers, not too old, that to support KVM, and make a cloud and play with it. Try it with OpenStack. Try it with Eucalyptus. See, now's the time to be part of that evaluation and getting this.
Okay. Question.
It is known that sometimes the local regulations of different countries are controversial, especially in such fields as information security. In case of such problem, will you make some local distributives, national distributives?
I will continue the question. I think you need the stack certification.
No.
Yes.
First of all, FSB.
Oh, okay. FSB, yeah. Or stack certification that this software is approved for Russian government organizations.
Well, I think this is one of the most interesting challenges and opportunities facing us. 10 years ago, we saw many specific projects trying to adopt open source in particular areas. And they had to do it all. So they were trying to get open source into 1,000 schools. So they made a desktop and a whole distribution, sometimes a packaging system, or they were making, an open source solution for Munich, or they were making an open source solution for, a government department somewhere. And in each case, they basically built their own little distribution, their own brand, and their own. What happened in the last 5 years is people started to realize that 95% of the work that was happening in each of these places was wasted. And in fact, if you're a developer, it's not that much fun to work on a project which has its major ambition to redo what somebody else has already done somewhere else. Right? So what started to happen is more and more of those projects started to use basically global platforms, of which Ubuntu is the most popular. There are others. But one of the real advantages of open source is that it's not one size fits all. That you can fix it locally. So this is the really interesting challenge. The first step to that is we see local derivatives. So we see a local derivative and the change flows one way. The really interesting question is whether we can actually turn that into a relationship where the change flows both ways. Kind of local co-development. What I would like to do is in the countries where this is important is establish teams funded by the country, and their job is to make sure that Ubuntu globally meets their requirements. So instead of doing a derivative, we actually have the ability to say, okay, let's get Ubuntu to the point where you can just take standard normal Ubuntu and it, firstly everything's perfectly translated. Secondly, it works with hardware that maybe only is relevant in this market. Third, it also complies with the certifications, or there's a path for it to get to the certifications that we need. That will require an investment. That won't happen for free, and it doesn't help me to get to the goal of something that anybody can use, because frankly Ubuntu does that today. But it's probably a lot more efficient way to spend the money needed to create a platform that has been certified than creating a platform from scratch. Certainly, maybe not for the internals hardcore security, but certainly for just general purpose use. And I think that's a very interesting model. We have recently set up a team in China with exactly the same sort of goal, where the Chinese currently have their own internal distributions, which are typically derivatives of international distributions. And I think they're realizing that they spend a lot of money doing that, and it's not very satisfying. The distributions are always behind the international ones. International community doesn't really want them because there's nothing new in them, because they're just so can they maybe start to try and do it differently? Can they essentially give themselves the assurance that Ubuntu is good enough for what they need, and also can they help influence Ubuntu in a way that other countries won't find unacceptable? And that kind of co-development to me, is very interesting. It's a new model, and I'm interested in finding places in the world where we can test it. Maybe this is one.
Okay, one more question.
It's a more personal than technological question. What is the part this all plays in your life? I mean, what's that business mission? What will you feel if this all disappears?
It's a very interesting question. So for me, Ubuntu is there's three things that it touches. One is I'm interested in change, and I'm interested in change in economics. And I'm interested in the relationship that technology has to change, has to economics. And all change in the world ultimately boils down to, social change ultimately becomes possible because of technological change which made possible economic change. Really, if you look at the big changes, the Industrial Revolution, I think this is part of that. I think this collaborative thing is a new phase, like a new state of matter. So I want to be part of that economically. I'd like Canonical to be successful. I'd like Ubuntu to be sustainable. So that's one part. Another part of it is social. I see people doing incredible things with Ubuntu, and I see people doing things with Ubuntu that they just couldn't do if we didn't do that, right? There are other options, but they have a weakness one way or the other. They're either essentially a teaser trailer for a real product instead of a real product in their own right, or they are an enthusiastic effort which can't close the gap. It's good for other enthusiasts. And Ubuntu potentially could be something new and different. So there's kind of a social angle there. And then there's technology. I'm a nerd. I love technology. I'm interested in it. And inside Ubuntu, we have big data. If you're interested in big data, we've got Hadoop and everything else. We've got little data. We've got programming languages. If you're interested in Google Go, the Google guys are building Go on Ubuntu, basically. And so there's a PPA which has the latest version of Google Go, and it's brilliant. It's the best way to get it. So if you're interested in OpenGL, you can play with Unity. If you're interested in games, people starting to build the games on Ubuntu. So just from a technology point of view, all of those three things, economic, social, and technological, I think come together. So I would miss it a lot if I didn't have it.
I wish continue the previous question. Which operating system used you like?
Oh, well, first, I'm completely unmarriageable.
Your friends.
Yeah, so I have a very patient girlfriend. And because she's, because she's sometimes impatient, we had to build Unity for her. So she uses Ubuntu, and she was one of the beta testers of Unity, and I made a lot of notes watching her use Unity. But very interestingly, every 2 years I update my parents' computers, and for the last 6 years, my dad's computer has used Ubuntu, and last December I got 2 laptops, and I put Ubuntu on one for Dad, and I left Windows on one for Mom. Gave them to them when I saw them in December. And a month later I saw my mom again. She had her laptop and she said, "Why don't you put Ubuntu on? This Windows thing is driving me crazy." So I thought, okay, now we're getting somewhere, finally. And it's true, Windows drives me crazy.
I'm not sure about my English, and that's why I ask you in Russian. Марк, сейчас идет отход от гнома. Возможно ли в следующих версиях, не та, которая будет сейчас, а потом, которая будет через несколько лет, опять вернуться к гному, если это возможно? Это первый вопрос. Второй вопрос. С каждой новой версией Ubuntu он все более и более прожорливый, и нельзя запускать на более старых компьютерах новые версии, потому что они просто не работают. Третий вопрос. 4 вопроса. Третий вопрос. Из репозиториев уходят программы либо совсем, либо старая версия. А в некоторых случаях люди они хотят именно старой версии видеть или другие версии. Вот что с этим делаться будет? И наконец самый главный вопрос. Не во всех Ubuntu не поддерживает все железо. Хорошо, если не поддерживает только периферийное железо, принтеры и сканеры, но оно не поддерживает внутренние устройства. Вот, скажем, очень много не поддерживается микрофонов. И компьютер, вот из-за таких мелочей, он не функционирует, скажем, для того же скайпа. Человек вынужден только из-за одного этого ставить себе Linux. Вот как с этим бороться? 4 вопроса.
Yes. Okay, the first question. Will you ever come back to GNOME?
Нет. Будет ли возможность, будет, кто захочет.
I mean, today you can just apt-get KDE desktop, and you have KDE desktop. If, because GNOME chooses, Unity is not part of GNOME, you'll be able to apt-get GNOME desktop. There are already people inside Canonical and people in the Ubuntu community who work together on a GNOME 3 PTA. It was not considered possible to bring it into the main archive without causing more trouble than it would solve. So absolutely, конечно, обязательно.
Okay, the second question.
Why would we punish GNOME? Because we maybe have a difference opinion of the city.
The second question is that Ubuntu, each version is more computer resources, and it's now impossible to install Ubuntu on slow computers as it was in the past, for example, for really cheap netbooks. Will we do something with it?
So we have 2 versions of Unity, for example, specifically because of this. There's the heavy sort of 3D version, and then there is specifically a more lightweight version. And we accept that there are even more lightweight environments for computers which can't even handle Unity 2D. And fortunately within Ubuntu there are things like XFCE and other environments which do handle that. But what we won't try and do is say that the only thing that you can get, or the thing that you can get, has to run on every computer which is out there, because that way we wouldn't be very successful. We wouldn't give people a very satisfying experience. So it's possible using Ubuntu to put it on older computers. We may have to make some choices.
I mean, optimized code that the computer should be so greedy as it now. the nearest version is less greedy than the previous. I mean that the tendency is that
the next version of Ubuntu is more and more resources on computer. And,
independently of Unity, independently
of Unity, just
The core.
You mean because we compile it for a newer kind of class of processor, or because we moved to 64-bit? What would drive that additional resource consumption?
Что вы называете? В чем он стал более жадным?
Вот, например, здесь у меня 9-я версия 9.10, она работает. 10.04 она просто невозможно на него работать. Вот конкретно. Тут да, there is no Unity.
Stick with the 9th version. Okay, I'd be interested to know. I think it'd be interesting to look into it. We did, for example, have issues with when we started bringing Erlang in, and Erlang initially had very heavy resource utilization, and we've slowly squeezed down for Ubuntu 1, for all the sync daemon and couchdb and so on. That actually raised our resource utilization. Now we've sort of squeezed that back down. So I think you have a point. I think what you say is true. You know, and occasionally we may have slipped and not pressed as hard on the resource utilization front as possible. But I think what we need to do in the cases that you're worried about is actually specifically look at it and see what's causing the resource. But I want to get to your fourth question, because you said that was something you loved.
Третье – это из репозитория уходит.
Yes, the main question is about support of hardware. For example, there is a problem sometimes in Ubuntu that you install it and you cannot use your embedded microphone.
Right.
And
There's only one solution for this, and it's going to sound harsh. The one solution for this is that everybody starts saying to wherever they buy computers, we want Ubuntu, we want to buy it from the shop with Ubuntu, and we want it to work completely. Because the way this ecosystem works is that the computer is actually made in China by a completely different company, right, than the one that you buy it from. And to get that right, it has to come out of the factory working. And for the last 3 years, we've built a group within Canonical that actually knows how to go into the factory and teach them how to do it and how to test it. It's amazing because they have a factory and it only does Windows. You know what I mean? And they test and they certify and they test it. Teaching them to do Ubuntu as well is very expensive. But we now have that ability. And slowly the factories in China are becoming better at doing that. But the only way to do this is to essentially say, we're buying computers and we need to basically create demand all the way up. There is just no way that we can fix the problem in Ubuntu if it's not actually being focused on in the factory, because that's just the nature of the ecosystem. So this is really, really important. It also, it's devastating to that when we have big fights about saying, well, what about Gentoo?
I don't mean new computers.
Ultimately, this will not work at all versions of Linux. This is the simple truth. It will not work at all versions of Linux can be installed on any piece of hardware and just work. Because there are so many things that need to be configured at the factory. That is especially for microphones. It's especially true for microphones.
I don't mean new computers. I mean 4 or 5 years old computers. If new computers don't support the equipment, it's simple to understand. But old computers don't function.
I understand your point. I understand your point. I don't think that there is any economic model to solve that problem in a guaranteed way for every computer, old computer. I think that we will get to a point where in the future it's possible to be confident that specific versions of Linux will just work. I think it's possible to be confident of that in the future. But to do that, we have to encourage, for example, defragmentation and the visible acquisition of Linux in the store as required. We need people choosing to order it that way. Otherwise, even though it's an intellectual problem, the real problem is not an intellectual problem of can we make it work. It's an economic problem. How do we make it work everywhere?
А четвертый вопрос по поводу репов. Вымывается из программы.
So I think if you are a recognized loco team, then there is a list of things that you can ask for.
We have one little problem. We can get things free via our
Through customers.
Yeah. So we need to produce such things inside our country or take this
You don't want to go running through shirt mention. Okay, I understand your question. I think we've done stuff like, for example, we've started designing CD wallets that can be produced locally more easily. This is very tricky because have had this question from lots of different countries, and there's a limit to how much we can do. But what we're trying to do is figure out how we can make it easier for people to work in their own country. The work that you do. If the work that you do, the most important thing, I think, is the fact that you are friendly. You know, you said you're small and friendly. And I think that's the most important thing, because that's the spirit of the community, of our community particularly. Right, but what's more important is if you can actually help them install it and teach them how to use it. That can be done from a USB stick. It doesn't need the CD. So I hear you, but I have to find a balance somewhere. So if you have suggestions as to how we can improve the balance. Now I know. Last question.
I have a financial question, so I totally the first part. The hub announced recently that its profit from last financial year was about $1 million. Does Canonical is profitable today? How Canonical earns money? What efforts more efficient, what less, such as relationship with partners or commercial support, and
That's the gentleman from Vedemost.
this question really interests
I have such a question. The next part, which is will be upstairs just now.
Следующая часть находится after question.
does Canonical work today?
Yeah, no, Canonical's not profitable today. So there's a balance as to how far I'll go with the free CDs. I hope so, yeah. Well, it's much more interesting if Canonical is profitable, because then there's absolute certainty about Ubuntu's future. So Ubuntu is interesting to me, but you don't want it just to be dependent on me, right? So that profitability is important. We made a very strong commitment that we were not going to restrict people's use of Ubuntu. So the only business models that we have are services to people who are using Ubuntu. So on the consumer side, things like content through Ubuntu One. On the enterprise side, things like support agreements, etc. So my visit here to build relationships with the local ecosystem is very important in that regard. And the extent to which users adopt Ubuntu and start to use it every day for what they do is also. There are many open questions about the sustainability. They're questions that I have a real interest in getting a good answer to. And I think it would be unique for all of us if we were part of getting to that point.
So, how do you think what will happen if suddenly there won't be any money or other financial means like potential funds for multiple workers and for money?
It would be
afraid
Sure, of course. As long as we fail to close that gap, that is a real risk. It concerns me. That's why I work every day. And I very much appreciate your help and assistance.
What do you think about latest strategies such as HTML5, WebSockets, WebGL? Are you planning to support them or somehow?
Absolutely the last question. HTML5 is fantastic. And what I was saying earlier about Chrome OS, the great thing is we should be able to do HTML5 just as good as Windows. And so, to the extent that HTML5 is the future, we can deliver an HTML5 future without Google knowing everything, right? I think that's quite important. So, there we go. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. It's nice to meet you. Thank you.